What we're talking about is 7 steps to maintaining your sobriety. Because the question comes up, if you are sober, so what? What now? What's the big deal if you're sober? Because the only thing you're going to do is sometimes go back downwards. You're going to relapse, and that's the challenge. And what you got to do is you got to shift your attitude to sobriety. What you got to recognize, what do I mean by shifting your attitude to sobriety? Because now you're at the start of a journey. And you're at the actual beginning of the rest of your life. And the big deal is you are not having your substance, the alcohol, the vices, all those things as your crutch. You're going to have to do it alone. And that can be the toughest part of your journey. You've got nothing to fall back on as such. What have you got to fall back on? Is yourself. You have to actually become the anchor of who you are. You have to become the foundation and the structure. Whereas previously you were numbed to the world, now you got to address the world on your own. What you got to do, and this is going to be challenging because now you cannot rely very interestingly on your logic and rationality in a manner of speaking. What do I mean by that? Because what happened is when you were faced with that trigger, that stressor, or even that fun times that made you use, you're going to, in that split moment, justify and rationalize why you can use. As much as you didn't do it to that very last second, that one iota of time prior to using, your mind's going to say, I got to use because she was bad to me, he was hopeless, or my boss gave me a tough time, and bang, you've gone down that rabbit hole. What you got to do then is take that mind that rationalizes and makes logical, put it aside, and step forward, I'm going to say, in faith, hope, and conviction, in something that's completely unknown and uncertain. You are at the start of a journey. And the problem with that journey, generally, when we face this in any way in life, it doesn't have to just be sobriety. It can be a new venture. It can be exploring something new about your life. We generally approach it with fear. And now you've got to shift your attitude from fear to, one might argue, fun. You have to view it rather than with trepidation, with excitement. Rather than concerned about the fact that you might be anxious, with anticipation of the joy and happiness you will feel. If you look at young children, when they faced with a new task, as much as it's a bit dangerous, they may be a bit afraid, what allows them to take that step? Because none of them are sitting here, I'm not having a pep talk with them. What allows them to venture forth, be it getting on a bicycle and riding on 2 wheels, is the fact that they get excited and energized, and the passion of doing this new task overrides and overwhelms the negativity of fear, unknown, and uncertainty. What you and I do as adults is we learn fear, uncertainty, and that becomes our primary characteristic, and it overrides the joy. There ain't no joy. Like certain activities like bungee jumping, not all of us do it. All right? Why? Because the fear, the anxiety overrides the excitement. And even the person standing on the edge, there's that fine line between fear and excitement. And once they jump over, they probably, oh my God, but there's that adrenaline, and you realize, whoops, hopefully that bungee cord held me. So there's excitement. So what you hope, you've got to get your mind into a state where you are driven more by the excitement of the discovery of your journey ahead. And that's got to be, you've got to address the unknown, not the known. The known is the using. You've got to address your journey ahead, and you are clueless. Because you're going to be stepping into a world you have no clue about. Because you've got to be clean for the rest of your life. So shifting your attitude is fundamental. And that then takes us, so you're aiming for the stars, right? And you've come from the bog of the earth, mud splattered in the gutter, but you've got to be excited. And there's then the paradoxical step 2. And what is the paradoxical step 2 is you've got to be absolutely humble. You've got to start at ground zero. Every day, you got to reset and say, I achieved nothing, as such, and I've got something still more to achieve. You can never say, I know and I got this sorted. Because what you're saying then, it becomes what you're saying then by saying, I know, I got this sorted, or I can do this. At some level, it may be important, but be wary. It's your ego that's standing up. And I use the word ego when it stands up. Imagine yourself like a soldier. And in the particular war I think of is World War I. You know, where people were dug into the trenches in the Mug Bog, and the one guy stood up, you probably, oh my God, you're in trouble because that sniper is going to shoot you. Recognize when your ego stands up, you are like that soldier in the trenches. And that sniper, he's pulling the trigger. And you spoke of the triggers that will get you back into relapsing and using. Those are the triggers you're facing, your ego. Because the moment you think you know you got it conquered, you got it sorted, is the moment your ego stands up. But this is, as much as it's not about substances, every day in life, when you think you know it all, is the day you realize you actually know nothing. But therein lies an excitement, because every step is unknown. And then you are living truly at the forefront of your life. Again, it's like that child who steps forward into the unknown, excited, and they have no clue what the game's going to offer. And that will allow you to develop an awareness of the world, because you're coming from the world that was probably a bit numbed and you didn't gauge emotionally. You're going to learn a lot emotionally, because now you'll have to be aware not just of the gross emotional cues people throw at you, the subtle emotional cues. And you have numbed yourself, not at a subtle level, even at a gross level. So you've got to move forward, take that step, but be absolutely humble. But it doesn't mean that you leave behind what you've learned. Because what you've learned allows you to cope with what you have to still learn. What you know already in terms of the tools you've got allows you to deal with the unknown. And that's where you need the structure and the, some might argue, a rigidity or a routine of what you do on a daily basis. And as you journey, you'll have to, on a daily basis, this takes us to step 3, introspect, reflect, contemplate. Some will argue even meditate. Why? Because that allows you to go within yourself. And when you go within yourself, you are less likely to take on the external cues of the world. And what I mean by that is that the world will throw at you all these stimuli. And what has happened that probably got you to this place is the stimuli became overwhelming. It became far too much, be it in a positive way or even in a negative way. And what happens is you had to numb yourself from that external stimuli. How did you get that stimuli? You hear it, you see it, you taste it. Because with food goes alcohol, with food goes gambling, with food goes a lot of things actually, all right? Okay, because a tummy satisfied, you can do lots of things and you can do lots of naughty things, okay? So the whole thing is that you got to recognize that you got to introspect, reflect, go into the deeper space. And that allows you to tie into, one might say, like a purpose, a cause, a meaning in your life. And in that deeper space, something very important, because this allows you to deal with one of the biggest triggers out there. One of the things I find, because you are going to be changing as a person, the reason we find the external world a trigger, your old friends' triggers, is you want to fit in. And part of fitting in is you have to be as exciting and as crazy and as chaotic, and one might add, as messed up as you were prior to coming in. And if you think of it, if you're not that way, if you're not crazy anymore, you're going to have to be calm, cool, collected. But they don't see it that way. How will they see it? You are damn well boring. You are not going to be invited to our Friday party ending on Monday morning. And probably one of the biggest deals is you think you rocked. You were the one who danced on that cop's car and did back somersaults and raced the car at 3 in the morning. I'm not saying advocate you did this, and got out of that speed trap situation and kind of crazy things where you found yourself lying in your front garden. At least you made it home on a Sunday afternoon, wherever it might be. You are now going to be boring. You're going to be accused of boredom. You are not going to be, hey, let's invite him. We got not much entertainment tonight. You bring the entertainment just by being yourself. Okay? Yes, you'll have to leave it behind. Because recognize, it operates at a lower energy level. What you're aiming towards is a higher level of excitement. If you seek that excitement, we want excitement. I'm not saying now be boring. If you seek the excitement, the energy, the passion, find it in a purpose. Find it in something that shifts the world, not what shifts the party at, or changes the party at a Friday night at 2 in the morning. You understand? You need to chase something more that's really life-changing, something that excites, invigorates you for the rest of your life. So it's worthwhile getting up at 6 in the morning on a Saturday morning. Or as someone told me, working till 2 on a Saturday night, from Saturday night till 2 on Sunday morning, and still getting up at 6 on a Sunday morning to chase their purpose, their meaning, in terms of what they were writing or what they were doing. It changes the whole landscape of what you're doing. The introspection allows you to recognize, wait a minute, I need to change who I am. And yes, you will be judged and criticized. And what people will do, they will endeavor to pull you down. Because hey, we like it when everyone hangs out at our level. We don't want someone to kind of stand out when it's like, hey, I knew him before. All right? And it's interesting then, yes, you will be judged. And what will be interesting though, you will find over time, be it a week, a month, years generally, they will look back and may not say it, but in some ways they'll be envious. And sometimes you'll be tempted. It's like gravity. They'll pull you back. They don't even have to say anything. You're there. You may walk away from the party. Next moment, you're there. You relapse. You're in. But you got to be the fire of where you're going to. The excitement has to pull you more so. It has to be like a headwind, a tailwind that's pushing you forward. You got to get there. All right? Whereas the negativity of the past, it becomes like a black hole that just sucks you in. And it's easy to gravitate towards lower energy levels. But it's tougher to get drawn to higher energy levels. But once you get closer, like gravity as well, it will pull you. But you got to kind of, in some level, kind of be lost in space for a while and thinking, geez, I might as well go back to that old party. Number 4 is you're never going to reach your goal. Because your true goal is infinite and eternal. Let me explain it to you in sobriety. Some of us, when we hear, be it for 3 weeks, the first week you were asleep, the second week you kind of got up, the third week, hey, where am I? Right? What the heck? Right? And then you got to leave. You just kind of like, oh gosh, I'm sober, I'm kind of over it. That's like step 101. You got to get to step 1001. And there's a whole lot of steps in between. And that too, when you get to 1001, it's like Mandela said something along the lines of, he got to the top of a peak and realized there's 1,000 other peaks higher than that peak. You are still at the bottom peak. There's still 1,000 worlds to conquer. What I mean is that when you chase a goal, a purpose, it is infinite and eternal. Mandela's one was freedom. We are still fighting for freedom. As much as you have achieved the level of sobriety, there'll be 1,000 more levels of sobriety. So what you might say, geez, what do I mean? Because now you're kind of like awake and you're kind of so-called aware of your environment. You're not numbing yourself from the environment. You're not numbing the pain. You're going to feel your environment. And let's take it further. You and I might be able to tell how someone might behave by what they say. But beyond that, that's the basic level of communication. Beyond that, it's about, even they say body language, which is, they say, is up to 70% of communication. And beyond that, if you look at these forensic detective movies, they'll tell you about looking at people's eye movements, or where do they look in terms of their eyes, or what they do with their hands. So beyond the gross body language, it's a subtle body language. But wow, if we could just pick up the subtle innuendos of awareness, beyond the body. So what I mean by that is that sobriety at its absolute level is infinite awareness of who, not just yourself, but everyone around you. And not just of everyone else, but of yourself. You got to be aware of yourself. And people ask, what's my purpose? Your purpose is where you fundamentally get deeper into yourself, that introspection we spoke of, to fundamentally understand what you are about and what then you're going to manifest in the world. And as much as you've achieved 1, 2, 3, 4 goals in your life, there's infinite more to achieve. Your goal, your ultimate destination is infinite in nature. And what will happen, something very interesting, because we are so destination driven, we are so outcomes driven, we are so results driven. Very important to recognize and think of it, people who have impacted you in your life. It wasn't necessarily what they may have achieved, as much as we follow Elon Musk and Richard Branson. Yes, that's cool on the social media platform. But in your personal life, the people that have impacted you is generally the type of character, the person they were, their being, rather than their achievements. Their being rather than what they did. How they made you feel rather than what they may have done. In terms of the wabi-sabi concept, in terms of Japan, what's interesting there, we get what you call it crockery, all right? And when it breaks, as often is the case, if you've got an 8-year-old and 5-year-old, you make sure you get the cheapest glassware in the house, right? But the Japanese have this amazing concept where they take this crockery, and you may have seen it, where they use gold, melted gold, or something to that extent, where they put the parts together, and it actually looks very beautiful in its broken set, in its put together state, all right? And it's seen as an art form. And where is it very fundamental? The fact that you are not perfect is something very interesting which you and I have been indoctrinated with, and subconsciously you and I follow. What we do is this. We've all watched movies. And movies follow a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's something very interesting. I'm not going to say it's bad with the movies we generally watch, beginning, middle, end, right? What introduction, body, and conclusion. It has usually something that's all comes together at the end. It closes up. It kind of has an element of perfection. The good guy wins, the bad guy loses. The hero and the heroine sail off into the distance. All these amazing things. What that does to our psyche is over time, you and I have been wired to believe that we should have that amazing ending, that perfection about our being. Yes, there's the 1 or 2 odd movies where it ends badly, tragically. And interestingly, the Hollywood studios sometimes have changed endings to ensure you have a good ending, because they recognize that sells more tickets at the box office. Very rarely you will have a bad ending. And hey, if that movie is a smash hit and you kill the hero, then you can't make number 2 or number 3. Imagine if Rambo did die in part 1. But interestingly, Rambo was based on the book. And the book, I think, along the lines of that he was supposed to die. Geez, imagine where we would be without Sylvester Stallone and Rambo 2, Rambo 3. And yeah. Okay. So the whole thing is that, but where is this important in your life? Recognize that when you may cross the finishing line, you may be completely exhausted, burnt out in terms of having used your body, your mind, your spirit for the achievement of something that delivers a difference to the world. It may involve at some level using yourself up to create meaning in the world and in your life. And we don't like ourselves kind of wiping sweat off our brow. But when you give of yourself, you're not looking for the world to give you so that you end up at the finishing line intact. Yes, in sports, it's actually quite a bit of a psychological game that you kind of look relatively intact at the finish. Why? Because it kind of psychs out the opposition that you may meet in a week or a month's time at the next track event. And you will not necessarily verbalize your weaknesses or the fact that you really struggle, because you want to achieve and appear mentally at the top of your game. So human beings think that we need to project this intact facade. And many of us use substances to facilitate a facade, to give the impression that we're intact. When you pitch at work on a Monday morning, you got to look like you got it all together. And some of us are brilliant at that. At some point, though, there's cracks in the facade. Why is there cracks? Because at some level, you and I haven't addressed our vulnerabilities, our weaknesses, our insecurities, and you and I have to go into that dark space. And when you go into that dark space, it's not just about using substances. Even when you are clean of substances, all of us have to go into that dark space. As Carl Jung called it, we have a shadow side. As Jordan Peterson describes, we all got our dragons to slay. We all have this weak side, this negative side, this antithesis of who we see us as being. We all have, as we call it from an Eastern perspective, our yin and our yang. That way you're a complete person. But I guarantee you, we are trained in the world to just show the good side. And the dark side is sitting inside us, festering, and we use substances and stuff to clean it up. And as much as you're now clean, it will visit you daily. In fact, probably be punching it to come to the surface more. And how you kind of had dealt with it in the past, let me numb it. But now it's not going to numb. It wants to play out there. Now you're going to get angry. Where the heck the anger came from? Now you're going to get moody. Now you get irritable. And now you don't have any Friday evening. I'm going to look forward to that Friday evening come down. You're going to have to face up to the fact that you're restless, agitated, and frustrated. And you may say, what the hell is that about? Is you're not being true to yourself. You got to reflect, check out what that dark side is about yourself. It's not dark, it's just the fact that you got to bring it to the surface and let it be, and be who you truly are. Number 5 takes us to another very important space. We spoke of triggers. People are going to pull you one way or the other. As much as no one said anything to you and you're on the freeway minding your own business, driving, it seems that you're being pulled one way or the other by the heat that's coming through, wearing these masks, the traveling long distances. Your body takes its toll. You're going to be feeling like a boat at sea, being pushed by one wave, one way, and then being pushed the other way. You're going to be rocking and rolling on this ocean. It's tough out there. And as much as you think, I'm over it, the world will just get you. Okay? You have to persevere and be resilient. People will criticize you, challenge you, judge you, or you'll feel that way. You'll get up and you watch the television and you think, geez, this is the government, the party that I elected into power. They just messed me up. And you'll use that as an excuse. As much as there's something going on in the other side of the world, you feel I have to use and abuse to numb myself from that mental and emotional pain of the world out there. You have to persevere and be resilient, because you're going to get, even as one patient of mine described, after his meetings, as we call it, on a Thursday night, which went on from 8 in the evening till 10, he used to feel so on a high, like so good after that powerful meeting. He'd find himself driving to his dealer's house. Your mind just takes you there. You have to persevere and be resilient. You're going to fall down mentally 1,000 times. You've got to pick yourself up and go. Again, beautiful kids, when they fall, they get up, they rub their shins, their knees, and they get up and go. You and I as adults, gosh, we fail once, we fail twice. Oh, that's it. Why? Because you and I have been wired, fail once, fail twice, get the hell out of school or repeat that grade. Right? That too only once or twice. You got to persevere and be resilient. In fact, that's like you got to be hardwired to accept the fact that there is no such thing as failure. You got to get up and go. Show me a person with intent and I'll show you someone with resilience. You got to have that intention. I'm going to be clean. I'm going to keep with it. I'm going to persevere. You got to make it your thing. Or else we will sit constantly, I relapsed. We know the story. And the problem is that story is a boring old story. Maybe the fun the first time, the second time, but after a while you've heard it all before. And perseverance and resilience, again, I look at it like you as a pendulum in the center. And there's pendulums on either side and they have a negative or you kind of, attraction repulsion. So you're repulsed by it, but all you're doing is you're going on the opposite side. You have to maintain your center, your anchor, your foundation. You got to keep in line, and you're going to be tugged one way or the other. But you got to be focused on your intent, focused on where you want to go. And very fundamental to resilience is you got to have a focus where you want to go to. As big as you're dreaming, I'm going to say you're dreaming too small. Aim for the stars, and if you land on the moon, at least you got out of the planet. And yes, you are, and you will be completely clueless as to what you're going to feel like or what it's going to be like when you kind of get there at some level. But then you got to be inquisitive enough and curious enough that I'm going to take a chance, I'm going to see what this is about. You've got one life to live, you might as well make it worthwhile. And yes, you may get there and they said, I guess some of us dream of a heaven where there's whiskey on tap. But you got to recognize that the joy and whatever you're chasing for is worthwhile, in spite of the fact that they may or may not have whiskey on tap. That you made your life worthwhile. We kind of hope for the fact that it'll be whiskey on tap, and we'll make logical and rational why we settle for less. Because all of us will say, I could have been a contender, as that movie line goes, and your but is your life story. Or you can say, I am in spite of my life story. Now, which one is more likely to trend or be made into a movie is the one who, in spite of, because we all love heroes. We all love heroines. We brought up in a mythology that goes back before Christ as such, BC years, as to a mythology of the hero rising up or the heroine rising up from the circumstances and the situations you face. That is the absolute story. Step 6 is, what is your story? All of us we spoke of earlier are caught up in this hamster wheel of life. And your story, you told it in this group. And as much as you relapse and you come back here, you'll say the same old story with a little bit of a twist at the end or something else. And you won't even blame the group. Perchance it's a completely different group from falling asleep. Because as much as they heard it the first time, the second time it gets kind of boring. And it probably gets boring for you. And that's why you're here. So you got to find a different story. And what we generally do is we create some story in our mind. But the idea is to tap into a universal story. Something far more powerful. And I'm reminded of a guy who's on YouTube and Twitter. His name is David Goggins, right? And his story was different. It wasn't about substances as such. It was about the fact he describes sitting at home at 2 a.m. He had a job where he used to go to restaurants in the middle of the night with pesticide spray for roaches and rats. And he comes back, and you had to get to restaurants after they close. So it could be 12 midnight, whatever time it might be. And he'd get home 2, 3 in the morning, and he'd go, as you do in the States, 24-hour takeouts, and he'd buy milkshakes and burgers. And he's sitting in front of the TV watching, and he's eating a burger and shakes or all these things. And he describes himself as not being in the best shape. And there was an ad on the TV for joining the Marines or some military regiment. And he then changes his life. He joins up and he shifts his life. And he still today talks about it. And he talks about it amazingly. He says along the lines of, if he has his judgment day, and you can decide what your judgment day is. And he's not talking about the Terminator judgment day. He's talking about the biblical judgment day as such, or the spiritual judgment day. He says, when you in front of your Maker, if you believe in such a concept, but it doesn't have to be that you have to believe, but if you, at the end of your life, and you look back and he's sitting in front of your maker, and the maker shows you a movie of how your life could be if you used your absolute potential, possibilities available to you. Have you lived up to it? And he shows you that video, that movie of who you are. And yes, in your mind, but I had that excuse, but that came in my way, that obstacle, that challenge, that drug, that friend. You got to decide whether you, because of all these things, or you're going to be in spite of. Imagine what your life story will be if you lived up to your absolute possibilities, potential available to you, your choices. And all of us in the world, be it sober or not sober, live in fear of our true potential. So we sometimes use, because, God, I have to face up to what I'm capable of. It drives us crazy. We don't want to. Because then you are truly living. But at the moment, we all have the most amazing excuse. We'll come up with the most amazing excuse. And if the world or people in the therapy group don't accept your excuse, who's at fault? They are, not you. Because they have no clue what you've been through. If someone tells you justify being a victim, which we do every day, we don't like those kind of words, we will give our excuse, our criticism and judgment of every situation, person, people under the sun. But your true story is so amazing. And in that true story, you are on like a rope that is tense, being pulled on either side by a logic and rationality and facing the illogical and irrational. Because then you are living in what you know as certainty and uncertainty. And every moment forward is completely unknown. And the story that will play out is something that has never been written yet. You are in cahoots with the universe determining the way forward. Wow, because it's like, again, taking us back to being kids. When you played, the world was exciting. You were happy. Why? Because you weren't living in a controlled, comfortable, safe, secure space. You are allowing yourself to step forward into that universal story. And then you are in flow with the universe and you are in cahoots with it. You become a conduit to what it wants to achieve. Maybe I need to say, I believe that the universe conspires for your greatest good. It has a far more powerful story than you and I can contemplate in our minds. Yet you and I live an iota, an atom of what that absolute story is. And that's where you then create a legacy. That's where you live beyond your 10 years, as we may say. Name any person that you and I know from generations before, as much as some of them are despicable and one will use the word evil, most of the stories you want to tell your kids are those who, as much as they live 10 years, seem to live forever. You think of it, one place that most countries do, put people who seem to have left a legacies on the top of banknotes or on the back of banknotes. Okay, in this country it's Mandela, right? And as much as your kids, your grandkids, we hope, will know your name, but we're not too sure whether your great-great-great-grandkids will know your name. But they possibly will know Mandela, even though he's left this planet already. Why? He created a legacy. He lived beyond. I mean, he didn't logically and rationally, we will be free by 94, make sure the curtains are ready in the house when I get in. He had no clue. He probably figured at some point, logically and rationally, someone must have told him, you're going to die in here. And he had to be driven by something weird, crazy. Optimism, faith, a belief in something that no one had a clue in the 70s or 80s for that matter would exist. But then you are truly living, because then you are using every aspect of your being. What the substances do is numb us to our full potential, because then we can live small. Now, what you're going to be faced with when you leave this place, you're going to have to live to who you are. I'm not saying now start living big immediately, but start building that process. Start getting into that framework of where you live completely. Because that's going to invigorate you. And what's that going to bring? It's very important to recognize when I use that rope intention. You're going to be challenged because at some moment now, You're going to feel bad and good, right and wrong, happy and sad. You're going to be insulted and also honored. But as I said to you, you've got to be resilient and persevere in spite of the criticism on one side or the other, be it good or bad. And very important with being honored, it takes us back to one of the previous steps, is keep your feet on the ground. Keep yourself grounded. Because the moment you go up with the honor and the praise, oh wow, you've been clean, welcome, clap, 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 first year, second year anniversary, and you go up there, you're going to fall. Your ego has gone up. You've got to keep yourself grounded. And yes, at the same time, you probably will be insulted in some form or the other. You know that. We all do. Or you feel discredited, or you feel ignored. All right? Then you got to raise yourself up. You got to lift yourself up. You got to believe in yourself. You got to aim for those stars. So they say a wise person, an intelligent man is one, and woman definitely, wisdom wise, is equipoised in spite of insult or honor, victory or defeat, right or wrong. You do not allow yourself to be because of how people judge you. Because it's your journey where you're going to. It doesn't matter how people judge you. Because the moment you accept judgment, you stop. Because you feel you've achieved. And you allow yourself then to be controlled by judgment. And when you allow yourself to be controlled, you stagnate. You become comfortable and you fester. You are not here to fit into some society. Yes, at some level, yes, fit into society. Drive on the appropriate side of the road. Wear masks, do those societal needs. But at the same time, you're supposed to shift, be driven rather, I will say, by a moral principle, ethics, values, which are beyond sometimes what society may accept. Certain things are acceptable, where in a few years' time will be unacceptable. As much as we sometimes still use plastic bags, in a few years' time it will be unacceptable. As much as we drink out of plastic bottles, it is going to be definitely in a few years' time unacceptable. Years ago, geez, what was this thing about straws? Now we dare not use straws. Because previously it was completely acceptable, now it's unacceptable. And there'll be other values and principles that today we accept wholeheartedly. In a few years' time it'll be, well, where were you coming from? And as much as there's some principles and values we accept today, years ago it was completely, geez, you guys real? And it was seen as completely illogical. And now we can understand why. But why we needed to go to that deeper space of introspection to recognize where we needed to go and buy into that bigger story. Because as I said, as big as you and I are dreaming, we are dreaming so small. And why we dream as big as we do is our mind allows us to dream big. But beyond your mind, there's a spirit. Your mind doesn't know it all. There's something more than your mind. Your mind, you know this, your kids' minds will possibly know more than you do. Okay? And as much as you are clueless about certain technology to this day and age, your kids will be au fait with it. But as much as they know, their kids will know far more than they will. And as big as you're dreaming, you are just dreaming within your mind's limitations. But if you truly dream as per the universe, it's an infinite mind. You understand? Because there's certain things the world and our minds still have to discover. And sometimes we can't get it, and probably the universe is kicking us up the butt to recognize where we're messing up. The final step, step 7. And as much as we endeavor and persevere, it takes us to, no matter what we do, or no matter what we say, no matter what you may achieve, it is fundamental that we show gratitude, love, kindness, and appreciation. I'll use other words along the lines of that. Caring, compassion, gratefulness. Because that's about what you do for people, what you make them feel like, rather than what you do for them. Because as much as you achieve, it's about being that being. Because people recognize you, as I said, for that. You and I need to inculcate that. We need to create an emotional space where others feel safe, and very important, you feel safe. Because when you're not using, you're going to feel completely unsafe, uncertain. Create an environment where you feel safe and certain. How do you do that? By shifting the environment around you, by expressing gratitude, gratefulness, appreciation for the world. And people say once you create that, it creates optimism. It shifts the energy. Because why do you use? Because at some level, you're feeling scarce, unloved, unsure. But by giving love, kindness, caring, you create a space where you feel loved. There's far, far less reason to use. And that way, you make these steps stronger. And recognize every single day you got to reflect, appreciate, gratitude, start from square one. Shift your story. Recognize it's a long, powerful journey. But as much as you've closed off one chapter in your life, you're opening up another chapter. And you need to get excited and energized by this chapter. Because if you just put sobriety, I've achieved sobriety, as the end of your world, you're there, you're going to fall. But if you open up to the infinite, you recognize there's so much more to achieve. You are still starting on your journey. And that way, you are tapping into the infinite capacity of your mind, should I say. Rather than saying this is it. And what happens is, why are we saying this is it? What happens is we become cynical and sarcastic and detached. And when we do that, we just go around and around in our minds. But let go of your mind, put it aside. Treat your mind like a servant and treat the universe as your master. And what you do is you've got to learn every day from that universe. And you show your thanks, your gratitude to the world at large. Forgive those that may have hurt you on your journey. Yet always show gratitude and compassion.